Eddie from Men's Social Lab, and I'm here with Cajun from Love Systems. And I'm sacrificing my time and money here to get Cajun drunk to get his secrets just for you. So stay tuned and wait for Drunk Cajun.
You guys are in for a real treat.
And how long have you been doing this business for?
So I started in professionally 2007 is when I started doing it. So what is that, 6 years? Maybe going on 7 or something. So yeah, since 2007. Then I worked with Love Systems since 2008, beginning of 2008.
So you did it for a year on your own with it? Or?
No. I was, well, before Love Systems, it was Mystery Method.
Yeah. And
I just got in with them, and I did a couple like one-on-ones, and I just got brought on as an instructor. And then it was just in that whole transitionary phase. And then so nothing was official until they switched over, and then I became official in early 2008. But I had been, my first boot camp or like seminar that I helped out at was in 2007. So since then.
It's been a little while.
So a long time as far as the age of the industry is concerned.
Right, so just like a little bit on your background, like how you started, just doing cold approaches in general.
Yeah.
Before you got professional, like what inspired you to start like just walking up to women and talking to them?
So there was a couple of things. So I'm from the east coast of Canada, and the only reason I mention it is because it's a really sort of social place. Like it's a small place, so everyone kind of knows everyone in the town I grew up in, and that was always normal for me. So I never understood this whole this fear, I guess, this approach anxiety. I mean, I understood it because even I would get scared to talk to a pretty girl, but I mean, just talking to people in general was always really normal for me.
Yeah.
So when I moved to, I went to university in Ontario, and then I moved to Toronto after university. And so when I was in Toronto, in university and even in high school, I was always involved in drama and improv and student council. And I always had sort of people knowing who I was, which it's easy to meet people when people already know who you are, especially when you're in, things on stage and people know who you are. So
bit of fame there.
Yeah, so that was easy. And I didn't have any skills. It was just people, girls would throw themselves on my lap, basically. And then when I moved to Toronto, I didn't have that anymore. And so the first time I was like, all right, looks like I need to, figure this out. I don't know how to actually meet people other than having them already know who I am. So I just started going out and just talking to people. And then I ended up reading The Game by Neil Strauss. And then after reading it, I was kind of like, shit, I'm an actor. This is ridiculous. This should be very easy for me because it's just using lines. And then I started doing that, and I just started going out every night. At the time, there wasn't a huge thing, at least that I knew about. The whole pickup stuff wasn't really mainstream at that point. The Game had just been released. I read it literally like a month after it was released, and no one really knew about it. But so what happened was I'd go out, and I didn't even have a cell phone at the time, so I'd go out and just try to get as many girls' numbers as possible and write them down on little pieces of paper.
Yeah.
And after a while, I started getting good enough that I wasn't getting rejected every single time, right? After months of doing it. So I met a guy, actually, that was in the bar that noticed what I was doing one night. And me and him started going out together a lot because he had the same sort of interests as me, and he was actually ended up being friends with Mystery, which is another interesting story. But we started going out every night, about 4 nights a week, every week, for about 6 or 7 months. And that's sort of where I cut my teeth on all this sort of stuff. So, it went from, I always tell guys, one of my skill sets as an instructor is that I've literally been through every possible situation you could imagine in the negative, like getting rejected. Like I learned by failing over and over and over again. Because there were no really forums that I knew about at the time to go and, pose questions or ask people for advice. I was, dirt poor. I couldn't even afford a boot camp I wanted to. So I just sort of did this by trial by error. And that's sort of how I got good, is by failing over and over and over again, until eventually, about 7 or 8 months in, I was consistent enough that I could get numbers and, impress, any guys that I was out with enough that they were like, wow, this guy actually knows what he's talking about. So that's sort of how I got into it. I ended up meeting, how I started working with Love Systems is I met 10 Magnet, he saw what I was doing one night and was like, holy shit, you're really good for a guy that hasn't taken one of our courses. why don't you come have a beer with me and the other instructors afterwards, and we'll talk. And so I did, and then he ended up inviting me to his next boot camp, and that's sort of how I got involved. That's actually, we should talk about that, because that's something that I think, especially guys that haven't taken, because I know you advocate this approach as well. I think we talked a little bit before. I think there's a lot of guys on the internet that think that, oh, the ideal way to do this, and I think one of the reasons they seek us out is because, oh, here's this logical sort of structure I can take to pick up a girl. Here's, I can say this, I can say this, I can say this, I can say this. If only I can pay for their services, I will have the blueprint of the exact script to say. And I mean, the truth is, I think that it's beneficial maybe to have something, especially when you're starting out, that you can just fall back on. And I still have these things too. I imagine you do as well. That when someone brings a certain topic up, you just have that story that just is associated with it. You can just pull out.
Yeah.
It's not scripted in the sense that you know every word, but it is sort of the same story you tell every time.
Yeah.
But by no means are we going in thinking we're going to say this and then this and then this and then this. And so I think a lot of the time guys have this false belief, especially very logically minded men, come in thinking, oh, this is the solution to my logical problem of not being able to get girls. If only I could learn the formula.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they get disappointed when we say, there's no formula. You can't do that. It's not going to work. And I guess there's a bit of a paradox there, because there is a formula, but it's not what you think it is. It's not like an actual written formula. The formula is more emotional things, or like even esoteric sort of in nature. It's, you got to work at honesty, confident truth, and body language, and these other things that are more driven by your state and your emotions rather than the logic of what you're saying. Most of the things that, like, there's always this stereotypical conversations men have about women or their wives, or women they're picking up or whatever. And they always, you notice a pattern in all those, right? It's like, one of the ones, I just saw a video today of the, I don't know if you saw this, the nail in the head video, where it's a girl,
yes.
You saw that, right?
That video.
You should link to it at the end of this video or something, but it's a woman, the video is basically a woman complaining to her boyfriend about how, she's like, oh, it's really, I have this pressure, and it's like, it really hurts my head, and she's talking almost like emotionally, and then it zooms out, and you notice there's a nail stuck on her forehead, and the guy's like, maybe you should just take the nail out of your, she's like, no, you don't understand, you don't get it, I'm not looking for a solution, I don't want to, don't try to help, solve the problem, I just want to talk. And yeah, and it's sort of like the women are with, one of the things that women sort of focus on in their everyday lives is emotional sort of issues, emotional problems. So it's about the emotion, not the logic necessarily. And again, it's not to say that women lack logic, they don't. It's just that for them, they're more focused on the emotion of things rather than logic. This has a lot of benefits as well. I think, like, there's always this thing where girls or women talk about, or men talk about, politics and how women make better, politicians and stuff like that. And I think that in a lot of ways, in a lot of sort of positions, they probably would. You look at politics more on an emotional side, it's like, okay, well, help the people, or help the issues that are making people struggle, or make things better, women will be way better at. Whereas the men are concentrating on things like, like the more logical things, like the budget of a war, like the actual brass tacks of math, the equations of how much to spend on budgets and stuff like that.
Step process.
Yeah, and then they get lost in the details and then make really bad decisions based on those things, right? We see the world entirely different, in two different sort of perspectives that are both equal in their own right. And what guys have to realize is that when they come into this sort of stuff with pickup, it's the woman's game. It's the woman's game. So you can't bring that logically minded sort of mindset to it. It has to be emotionally driven. So when you're out at bars and you're out meeting women and stuff, you have to understand that if you're not attracting her emotionally, there's nothing, right? And this is the problem, because guys think, oh, I can attract her logically.
Yeah.
If I talk about how much money I make, and the kind of car that I drive, and the people that I know, she should be attracted to me. And it never works like that.
For myself, I had kind of bulldoze myself through it.
Yeah.
Just push through regardless. And just like, oh, hey, and do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell to a guy who's like 'cause I'm sure you get this a lot too. Like, I don't know what to say, but really what they're saying is they go, I'm scared.
Yeah.
What do you tell a guy to just get over, like how to get over it?
When they say I don't know what to say, they're actually saying, yeah, either I'm scared and I can't think of anything, or they're so focused, and not to keep going back to the logic versus emotion thing, but they're so focused on the, you know, the formula of what they need to say. Maybe not just the first thing, but what they say after that, and after that, and after that. And so that's why, we mentioned earlier the confident truth. If you have nothing to say what you're doing, right? Say the truth of why you want to talk to her. Like, so I say, if a guy says, I don't know what to say to her, well, why do you want to talk to her? Well, because she's cute. Tell her that, right? So you can just go up and so when it comes down to it, you can just always give the honesty of what you're doing. Even going up and saying, hey, look, I never do this, and I'm actually really nervous right now, but you're really cute, and I had to come over and say hi. That is better than like doing nothing at all. In fact, that's not even so bad. There's a lot of girls who would find that really endearing and would respond positively to that. Whereas if you go up and if you stress about it and try to even think of the most perfect line to say, if you go in with that mindset, that attitude of I needed to think of something good to say, it hardly ever works.
Yeah.
You'll go in and you'll be like, hey, what do you think about mustaches? And they're going to be like, fuck off, like go away. You're being weird. And weird, of course, being what I said earlier, not lining up with what you want.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys that are in this situation, I just say, look, you can be scared and cry right now to yourself inside and say, oh, I don't want to do it. But really all you're doing is you're giving power to that sort of like little girl in your head, that ego defense, being like, no, don't hurt yourself. You're gonna get hurt. You're giving into that. So just don't do that. Just don't even think about it. Just put one foot in front of the other and walk over there. And I mean, if I'm teaching the guy, I'll say, look, if you don't do it, I'm literally gonna pull you over there. And if that's not gonna work, I'm actually gonna go over there and say, hey, my friend was too scared to talk to you, but he thinks you're really cute, and sort of give them no option. But as for when you're out on your own, for me, when I was going out, I always tell myself, just walk over. Like that's the only thing you should be thinking in your head, the only logic you should be using is how to walk, right? Not even in a sexy way, just make sure you don't fall over as you're walking over.
So no sexy walking, just do it?
No, I mean, if you get better, you can think about that. But for the most part, when you're walking over, it should be state-based or like emotion-based, right? So it is, I'm going over, I don't care if this works or not, I just want to have fun tonight.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys, they drink, right? Because they want to, when you drink, it lets go of the logic side of your brain, right? That just sort of alleviates the pressure, and it makes you sort of less inhibited. So you don't worry about what to say, because you don't give a shit anymore. You just say the first thing comes out of your mouth. And a lot of the time, if you're a nervous or a shy person, your game's a hell of a lot better when you're drunk than you are when you're sober, because you don't. The thing is, it would be a lot better if you were sober, if only you let it out. But we hide behind these ideas that we need the perfect thing to say. We need to have a plan of what to do and what to say and how to move, how to touch, which is bullshit. You don't need that.
So it's kind of like the guys thinking about this, like they could get a key, pick up key, and they just use that key and open the woman, and all of a sudden it works.
Yeah. Well, that's why the advice that you always get from women, like your mom, the classic advice from your mom, right? She says, be yourself. And that makes no sense to guys. Guys are like, that's not advice, that doesn't help us, right? When you get better at it, you realize that's actually really good advice, because she's staying it from an emotional perspective, right? It's so easy. Just be yourself. If everything you do is true to you, then you're fine, right? But as guys, we can't do that. We try to, when we have a problem, the problem being, how do I pick this girl up? And as soon as you start looking at it from a logical perspective, it all falls apart. Because now you're thinking, how do I do this? And it's not a logical problem. You're taking a logical system and applying it to an emotional problem, which doesn't work. So the big thing with this that I try to teach guys is that you need to abandon that. And this is the biggest paradox, because we do teach logical sort of structures. But the logical structures are not for the women. They're not to make it pick them up. It's for the guys. It helps the guys abandon the logical structure, or at least get them on the path to abandon it. Because the only way they're going to abandon it is if they actually have confidence and the fact that they believe they can actually do it. And the only way we can make them believe they can actually do it is to give them a logical structure, so they'll actually attempt to do it. Yeah. And every time they attempt it, they get to a position, which is what the initial question you just asked, they don't know what to say. and they work through it. Because once you're in there, you can't just leave. And if you do leave, you feel even worse. So a lot of the time, guys stand thinking like, and they do have those awkward moments. But then eventually, they'll you know, a girl will ask a question or they'll hit on a subject that they don't need any routines to talk about, and it'll flow naturally. And then like, oh, that wasn't so hard. It's like, yeah, man, it's easy. You just got to have your brain in the right place, and it has to be away from this problem solving and more in the emotional base, sort of like, I'm having fun, I'm in a good state, I don't care, I don't need something to say. Guys always say, you know, you mentioned earlier, what if I run out of things to say? What if I run out of shit to say? So here's a big revelation for all you guys watching. You don't make women uncomfortable when you run out of shit to say. You make women uncomfortable when you run out of shit to say and then you get uncomfortable. That's what makes women uncomfortable. Not the fact that you ran out of stuff to say, the fact that you got uncomfortable by it. You can not say anything and be totally comfortable, and it's okay, right? So if you run out of shit to say, just look at them and smile. Just look at them, lean back, and smile. And they'll say something. They'll pick up the conversation. They'll be like, so what do you do? And you just sort of nod your head and smirk as if you know what's going on. Maybe they're hitting on you now, right? So, and that's the big secret, is it's not really a problem unless you let it be one.
It's interesting you say that, because I had ended up being like a little fling with a really hot girl that I approached on a boot camp. And I told her, I said, I was just standing there looking at her, I said, well, I don't have anything else to say, I'm just going to stare at you.
Yeah, you can say that.
Yeah.
Bring confident truth, right? The fact that you don't know anything to say, you can say that. You know what? I've been talking for 5 minutes, I can't think of anything else to say. Say something. Give me something good. And that's it.
Yeah.
And
I actually started laughing because of it.
yeah.
And then she looked away, and then she looked back at me, she started asking me questions.
Yeah.
And
women will always take your lead with that sort of stuff. Yeah. It's like, oh, he is saying something that logically sounds awkward, but he's not awkward. Therefore, it's not awkward. This is why when you use lines, you can say something that logically sounds very good or attractive or whatever, but emotionally they don't buy it, right? And this is why girls will say sometimes, is that a line?
Yeah.
Even if they never heard it before, because they can tell by the way you say it.
Yeah.
It doesn't line up. This is the creepy thing again, right? Reality doesn't match up with what you're trying to, you know, convey.
Yes.
Through your words. So this is why you need to abandon this logically minded nonsense. Which is...
This is Eddie from Men Social Lab, signing off at the pub, slightly drunk, off 2 beers. I'm a week drunk.
This guy.
And with Cajun from Love Systems, and thanks again for coming out.
I had 20 beers. For the record, I had 20 beers.
That's why this bill is so expensive.
Yeah. I soaked it all into my Viking beard.
Bananas can you eat in 60 seconds?
10.
How much wood could a woodchuck chuck?
7.